Now, a salvage operation starts in the Channel today to recover radioactive waste from the French freighter which sank at the weekend. If you remember, it had been in collision with a cross-channel ferry. The ship is lying in 50 feet of water about 10 miles off Ostend. The main problem is the recovery of containers of a uranium compound, an operation which could take several weeks. The Channel is amongst the world's busiest sea lanes. It may be hard to believe, but a ship sinks there, on average, once every 3 to 6 weeks, although we only hear about a few of these accidents. So how will these chemicals be salvaged, and is there anything that can be done to prevent further collisions? Well, Anthony Renouf works for Sea Trade magazine. Today, Greenpeace has said that there's a high risk of puncture of the container, and therefore an explosion could happen. How difficult is it going to be to retrieve the containers down there?
Well, as salvage operations go, Selina, this one is a real doddle. I mean, the ship is not even sunk totally. There have been much more complicated rescue operations mounted in the past on a commercial basis, an awful lot of the time when a ship could be brought back to the surface, or at least the main part of its cargo. It hasn't been done because of the expense. The technology and the skill is there. And in terms of the risk of explosion, I'd have thought this was one of the least dangerous operations in the last sort of 5 years of major shipping casualties.
So Greenpeace need not worry. People who are fearful at the moment about this operation need not worry at all, you're saying?
Well, people who are fearful about any form of nuclear sort of material of any kind, of course, will worry. And people who want to worry about anything will always worry.
But to retrieve this particular cargo, they shouldn't?
No, I would have thought, in terms of operations, they could turn their eyes to certain other areas of shipping where there are far more hazardous cargoes being treated in a far more cavalier fashion than the way they normally treat nuclear material.
Well, let me turn you to that. What kind of cargoes and whereabouts in the world are they treating it in such a cavalier fashion?
Well, I mean, all across the main oceans, where they've got much worse weather than the Channel. And by the way, the Channel is the busiest sea lane. It's not one of them. They have liquid natural gas, they have chemicals, they have fertilizers, nitrates, all stored sometimes in very sort of slapdash manner, which, if they were involved in a collision or in a sinking or exposure to water, could cause the most almighty threats to life and limb, and yet nobody checks them at all. Nuclear fuel is a sort of an obvious hot political issue, but in terms of the number of vessels sailing per day, it's a very small area of risk.
Let me turn you to the business of transporting spent nuclear fuel, say from Dounreay right the way through down Windscale to Dounreay. Yeah. How dangerous is that?
It's as dangerous as the transportation by road or rail. British shipping itself is very safe. British shipping laws are very tight. That isn't the real risk. The risk is that any country in the world can put any ship to sea and sail in high seas, which is international water, with any cargo it wants. That's the real nature of the risk. The fact that we might have very tough laws of our own, for our own waters. Some little ship under Panamanian or Liberian flag can be bombing along the Channel completely outside our control. They don't have to report in what they're carrying. Even when they have a collision, they don't have to report it. And they can then ultimately cause the most almighty potential pollution.
Do we have tough laws? You said we do.
We do for our own ships, and we do have for ships coming into our waters.
But what about on the seas themselves?
Well, you see, the seas go back to this sort of amazing thing that shipping was invented long before governments were. And so all the way through the growth of shipping, no government has wanted to claim too much water for itself, for fear of the fact that another government would do it back to us. If we and the French took over the Channel and said every ship that passes through must say what the name of its master is, what its cargo is, what the qualifications of the crew are, all our vessels trading around the world, and we are still one of the major shipping powers, would suddenly be subject to controls of other governments in much narrower straits than the Channel, which are vital to shipping. So Whitehall is very reluctant to press in international gatherings for too great an extension of national control over free water.
So that means that the master of the ship, in actual fact, is truly the master of his ship.
Oh, yes.
He has total control of what he does and how he steers his ship through some of the busiest lanes in the world.
A master can, because of the ancient traditions of freedom of the sea and the fact that the master must be responsible by ancient common law, the fact that nowadays you've got radio, satellite communications, computers and everything doesn't seem to have entered the heads of the legislators. And the master can, in fact, should be able to be directed in the same manner as a man flying a plane. But, as I've said, because shipping is so ancient in its traditions, governments haven't caught up yet.
And yet, there's so much secrecy, to come back to the French freighter, there's so much secrecy concerning the cargo, how much is in there, you know, where it was going. Why is there such secrecy on the government's part over that?
Well, I mean, would you sort of broadcast the fact to every passing vessel, every passenger ferry?
If it was for safety, surely not.
Yes, but I mean, one or two cynics might argue that actually announcing it might cause panic, don't you see? And there's all those wonderful little tricks governments can play to avoid publicity. OK, they've got an awful lot of it, but in the next 24 hours there'll be another ship sailing down the channel with probably twice the cargo of this one, and it won't have a collision.
So there's very little that can be done, you're saying, in the end,
so far,
to prevent it?
Until governments themselves decide to take over the seas. When that comes, we'll presumably have some sort of world peace order, God knows what.
Anthony Renouf, thank you very much indeed.
Actually, Anthony, before you go, we had a guest yesterday on Breakfast Time who was saying, much as you were, that the cargo is nothing like as dangerous as many have made out. He was very critical of the way that the press, the media in general, have treated this story. Do you share those criticisms? That it's been overhyped?
Yes, I'll put it like this. When the Imoko Cadiz went aground off the channel, in the channel, right, the television cameras were everywhere. 4.5 years later, the best investigation ever done by the Liberian government's independent inquiry produced all the stuff. And to be honest, I did actually phone up a few people at this organisation, one as well, that was saying, hey, look at this for a story. They found out why the ship crashed. When was that? 4 years? Oh, no, thanks. See what I mean? So there is this tendency to go for the immediate and not for the long term, for your good selves.
The disaster.
Yeah.
We all love a good disaster. All right, thanks very much.
And now news of what at first sight appears to be one of the strangest meetings of the day. In London, representatives of the famous British cruise lines Cunard and P&O will meet officials of the Soviet shipping industry for important talks. The British firms are alarmed at the way Russian ships are taking a larger share of the cruise market. They want the Russians to voluntarily restrict the number of cruises they sell in Britain. Russian ships now operate regularly out of British ports, and the Russian company CTC has become the second largest cruise operator in Britain. The Falklands War and the requisition of British cruise liners as hospital ships and troop carriers gave an unexpected boost to the Russians. They moved in quickly to pick up business lost by the British cruise ships during the war. British shipping operators now fear that it will be difficult for them to recover the large share of the market they've lost to the Russians. Now, Anthony Renouf, surely if it's cheaper to go on a cruise, it's better for the public as a whole, and they have a better choice and they can pick a better holiday for themselves. Surely it's a good thing.
I mean, you're saying that. It is cheaper in nearly every single case. But it depends, of course, as you're a member of the public, what you actually want. I mean, these ships are not exactly converted whalers, but they don't go a bundle on double glazing either. They are essentially far more Spartan than our Western liners.
And yet in front of me is this CTC Cruises brochure for 83, which shows ships, if I can show the camera, ships that are absolutely stunning. They're white and gleaming, and how can you say that they're...
No.
They're not very good?
No, I wouldn't turn down a trip myself. What I'm saying is that in terms of comparison and actual service, contact with the staff, which is another important point, your actual general sort of Russian sailor tends to be less, shall we say, consumer-orientated than your Western one. But there is, of course, a very obvious price advantage, which can't be ignored.
When you say consumer-orientated, can you describe what you mean by that? I mean, mine boggles, actually.
I personally, as a shipping journalist, haven't taken a cruise on a Russian liner. But what I have been given to understand, admittedly more by the British competition, is that there is not the same sense of consumer orientation on the part of the staff, going from the captain down. And I'm not saying they're unfriendly or that they're bad as providers of services. But the thing is that they are essentially not the same. I mean, these brochures show what beautiful ships they have. But you compare these to the Cunard ships. Yes. There's no comparison.
Well, why are the Russians getting into this market?
Because they want something very important to them called foreign exchange. Lots of lovely folding stuff. Dollars, pounds sterling, Deutschmarks. They'll take anything. And they will operate at real costs, please note, real costs, perhaps a quarter the amount that British shipping companies do. The reason they pay their crewmen's wages a quarter of the amount they pay British wages. They have no insurance costs, but they have very cheap fuel, and the insurance cost is actually an important one because for a British shipping company it can be as large as the petrol for the whole voyage. And in the end, they don't need to make a profit. All they need is foreign exchange. And as long as they can get more foreign exchange from sailing the ship than from they get more than it costs them to run it, they don't care. They can quote any price they like. And what's more, I can tell you, they will go lower still if they need to.
So the British agents, in fact, can't do very much about it?
Well, not really. The important thing is that just like in the freight market, not one passenger would be on board a Russian ship or 1 ton of cargo shipped in a Russian freighter if it wasn't for all the British shipbrokers and travel agents scurrying about getting them the business. So any question of saying we support the national effort is a little bit sort of futile if, in fact, everybody's hunting to get their little commission.
Yes, I noticed at the back of this brochure again, if I can pick it out, that the British Rail have, in fact, done a deal with the Russian shipping agencies. They've marked here They've marked here rail trips from Scotland to the ports, the nearest ports,
yes.
and they've cut prices in that way.
Exactly.
So what you're saying is that it has to be a concerted effort by people here in Britain to stop this Russian cruise industry.
If that's their choice.
If that's their choice.
But there is a certain grim logic in the fact that British Rail, of all people, should be doing a deal with them. I don't know when you last had a meal on a British Rail train, and I wouldn't make a direct comparison either, but you can see the point that state industries have a natural affinity, one for the other. Private industries, which shipping up to now has been, doesn't have that sort of affinity. They compete like anything. They normally offer low prices, and they are being driven out of the market.
Briefly, talks today then, where will they get us?
I personally think they're just window dressing.
Thank you very much.